Space Coconut.
Okay, today we're going to talk about the top 10 things I'd like to see changed or announced in the next year for Dead by Daylight. Before I get into it, why don't you sub to the channel, hit the bell, like the video, follow me on Twitch and Twitter, the overlords are making me do this, join the Discord, and share this video with people who might enjoy it. Links to everything are in the description. Number 10. Elodie's Scream. While we're all impressed by the voice actress's seemingly endless lung capacity, our ears can only take so much of this. Hopefully they turn the volume down on this by a few hundred decibels, so we don't have to slug Elodie players to avoid being punished with the shrill, ear-bleeding scream of a survivor we successfully put on a hook. While you're at it, why don't you have one of those experimental weekends where you disable the chase and ambient music? This way we can see if the intrusive chase music is as necessary as everyone thinks it is. 9. Loot boxes. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why the hell am I asking for loot boxes in the game? The monetization is bad enough as it is. You're absolutely right. However, Leaks by Daylight uncovered some new currencies that are going to be implemented into the game sometime in the future, and the only thing I can imagine the corporate greed monsters doing to the game is to implement more monetization into it. While this would be the last straw for many people, making fun of loot boxes in the game would create many entertaining videos on this channel and enable me to make multitudes of I told you so videos just begging for the behavior white knights to defend the greed of their masters. Can you imagine the shilling the fog whisperers are going to have to do if loot boxes come to the game? It's going to be hilarious. You thought the Halloween event and Chapter 18 fiasco videos did wonders for this channel? Just wait until they implement gambling for children, also known as loot boxes. Number 8. Breakable Walls. It would seem that the consensus on breakable walls is that they're used to create infinites that the killer must break in order to have a normal loop. This asks the killer to spend more of their already limited time resource to remove a deliberately designed infinite. I would hope to see plans to have breakable walls looked at and placed with a different mindset. Have the loops be fair, but like pellets, once the wall is removed, the area becomes very unsafe. It was said in earlier dev streams that the goal with a match is for survivor resources to dwindle as a match goes on. Why not apply this with the same thought process behind pallets? Alternatively, create very unsafe areas for survivors and give them the opportunity to create a more fair loop instead. Imagine a doorway in the middle of an unfair loop for survivors, but they close the door or drop debris that creates a vault in its place. There are better ways to implement breakable walls, and I hope 2021 sees them improve in different ways. 7. Make Almo grind the game until he's spent a month or two playing both roles at a very high skill level. Train him in the ways of Survivor, and after he's a decently skilled survivor, have him go against baby killers with your perfect matchmaking. Let this guy learn what the game is like at higher levels of play, playing killer against higher skilled survivors, so he has a much better idea of how to balance the game. It doesn't help anyone when gameplay like this is the reference point of a person in charge of the balance of the game.
Honestly, if I get one kill on this group, I'll be happy.
Please, give this guy a quota of matches or something. Anything to get his nooblet ass some high skill in the game he's supposed to be balancing. Have him play some scrimmage matches against some of your fog whisperers. Have him play against high skill Swift teams with all of the meta nonsense for a week or a month straight. It doesn't even have to be intensive. Just monitor his progress to see if he can actually understand the impact of his decisions before they're implemented. If you can implement changes that don't need to be changed weeks after they're implemented, like so many other changes you've made in the past, then he's going to be better at his job, so he's not wasting his time on changes that are going to be reverted within a week and that just piss everyone off. How amazing would it be if he knew what he was doing in the game and actually understood the plight that so many players go through and made sensible balance changes that the community as a whole could get behind. Please, help Almo be better at his job, for everyone's sake. 6. Map sizes for some maps still feel too large, and getting across them feels like a long journey that just bleeds gen time. Mother's Dwelling and Ormond come to mind, as well as the loop fest that is Haddonfield. Lighting issues may as well be tweaked while you're at it. Autohaven is green, but it doesn't look as good as Macmillan Estate maps do. Maybe they can do something about that too. 5. Bring Trapper into modern-day Dead by Daylight. While his kit worked well for 2016 Dead by Daylight, the game has evolved since then, and some time should be taken to bring him up to par with the other original killers that have been adjusted over time. I'd really like to see some help given to him alongside other nerfs and changes other killers will be receiving this year. Help the flagship killer out, will ya? 4. Adjusting Decisive Strike. Decisive's duration is being reduced because we found you could spend too much time doing other things and still have it available. Does that sound like a fair and reasonable nerf to Decisive Strike? That's because this is exactly what Almo said about the nerf to Pop Goes the Weasel. This Joker's reason to nerf Pop is exactly the reason why Decisive should be changed as well. I guess we can only wait and see what they'll end up doing or not doing by the end of this year about Decisive Strike. 3. Optimization. Congratulations! You made the game prettier to look at. Now how about you optimize it so it'll run on people's consoles and PCs without turning them into space heaters with jet engine fans that nearly break fuses in apartment buildings. I don't know much about coding, but I do know that Dead by Daylight is the only game I play that makes the lights in my room flicker when I turn it on. That probably shouldn't be happening, right? 2. The grind. This, I think, is one of the few things that many players will agree with. The grind is too big for what players get out of it, and I hope we see a solution to this growing problem. Currently, there are 86 survivor perks and 78 killer perks, and without boring you with the math, it adds up to roughly 7 million blood points for survivor and 6.3 million blood points for killer in order to gain all the perks on a single character. This is not including prestiging them, which would add about 3 million blood points to the total, making it about 10 million blood points for both roles for each character. As long as they continue their content schedule of 3 new perks per character, this grind is only going to get bigger. I would really like to see a solution to this growing problem. The easiest answer would be more blood hunts. But as we've seen from the winter event, it would seem that blood hunts will become even more rare than they used to be. I hope we see or hear a solution about this problem this year. And the number one thing I'd like to see changed or worked on in 2021? Good matchmaking. Remember the MMR system they implemented and then disabled after it was somehow matching brand new players against players with many, many more hours than them? We haven't heard anything about that system since then, so I really hope we hear some news about the matchmaking changes they have planned. Or in a complete miracle, come to find that they implement a functioning matchmaking system sometime during the course of the year. In a recent stream by Almo, he got into a discussion with a viewer about the Billy nerf and was talking about how the nerf was merited because Billy was overperforming. The same thought process is being applied to Freddy for his incoming nerf.
It doesn't matter if the community says he's OP, if he's OP. We've got statistics on literally millions of games, and he was overperforming, so he needed a nerf. Remember that we have very broad statistics because we've got a million. We have like on the order of a few 100,000 daily active users and like a million weekly active users. So as Clint says, we can filter for experience, and we can say, how does Hillbilly do among people who've only played him 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times? We can do all of this shit. So Hillbilly was OP, I'm sorry, man.
There's a lot of people that at high ranks will either just not play nurse at all or only get to proficient. There's not that many nurse mains that can...
But I'm not looking at the statistics like that. I'm looking at it by taking the top 1% for kill rate of players who play each killer. So this is the top 1% of nurse players. Not the top 1% of players in general, but the top 1% of nurse players. And you can, with the number of players we have, you can make the assumption that the top 1% of players have pretty much reached the skill cap of their respective killers. We have enough data to where we're not talking about like pools of thousands of players. We're talking about literally millions of players. And so those small number statistics and outliers that people with these opinions like to bring up, they're just not valid. Every new player does not start by playing Freddy. And if we're looking at the top 1%, that is not new players. Those are people who have invested heavy amounts of time into it.
I mean, I
The
think
most important thing that Almo or that viewer weren't considering in their discussion was the fact that the high kill rate isn't just attributed to the killer being good or being the top 1% of killers being good with that killer, causing that killer to overperform. They didn't seem to be considering the opponents those top tier killers were facing. If they looked at the data they have for those top 1% of killer players and filtered out the top 1% of survivor players and then cross-referenced those data points, they would have an accurate measurement of whether a killer was overperforming or not. Based on what Almo was saying in that clip, they're comparing the data of the top 1% of killer players compared to all of their opponents. If the majority of their opponents are not in the top 1% of players, then how likely is it that the top 1% killer player will get a dominating 4K in their match? As an example, I do pretty well in my matches, while there are a few where I struggle and lose, compared to the dozens that I win easily. My kill rate is high only because my opponents aren't equally or higher matched to me in these cases. Matchmaking is a major core issue to the game that needs to be a high priority, since the devs can't possibly be getting accurate data about the strength of perks and killers if the matchmaking isn't putting equally skilled players together. The statements Almo made about the data proves this assumption as a fact, and I recorded those clips as I wrote this section. How many of those millions of top 1% matches are against survivors who shouldn't be facing a top 1% killer? And this is an important aspect of the data that shouldn't be ignored, but it's Almo, and he seems to have an excuse for everything and knows things that we don't. After all, this is the same guy who said people didn't understand how to use Clown, and yet he's getting some changes to improve his performance. What up, Almo? What about that data, huh? I got sidetracked. Fix matchmaking. It's the most important thing that needs to be taken care of in 2021. But that's my little list of changes I'd like to see for Dead by Daylight in the next year. What are changes you're hoping to see in the game in the coming year? Or maybe you've given up on Dead by Daylight. In that case, what games have you gotten into? Let me know in the comments below. And until next year, I'll see you in the fog.